The holiday season is gearing up, and last week on the show, we solved the Thanksgiving turkey. This week, we solved boring leftovers by shoving everything on a Thanksgiving plate into big, beautiful raviolo, or ravioli, depending on how you serve them. And when you cut open one of these raviolo, the gravy will ooze out, creating the sauce for the pasta. It's a beautiful little technique. And just a heads up, this Saturday, November 12th, is my next Sunday supper event with guest chef Joe Sastos, the man with the magical mustache, and you've seen him on Chopped and competing all over Food Network. He'll be making a Sasto family gravy. It's gonna be a party. We'd love to have you. If you're curious what Sunday supper is, I'm gonna leave a link to a video down below that explains it. Otherwise, the link to buy tickets will be down in the description as well. I wanna thank our sponsor today, Comatir, but more on them later. For now, let's just jump right into it. Now I've got myself some beautiful pasta dough right here. It's perfect. I made it yesterday, and here's how I did it. Now we've made this pasta dough before. This is Evan Funky's basic egg dough, but I've made a tweak to it, so pay attention. We're going with 454 grams of 00 flour, and then his recipe calls for 225 grams of egg, but I find it's always just a little bit dry, and 225 grams is less than 5 eggs. I'm just gonna add 5 eggs, which comes out to about 265 grams. And then I made a really dumb mistake. I got a little egg on my camera, and instead of actually cleaning it properly, I just cleaned it with a paper towel, smudging the egg on the lens, so if this side angle view is a little blurry, that's why. Then we want to take the flour and we want to pour it onto the board and create a well with some nice tall walls, and then we're going to pour the egg mixture right into it, and then we're going to start to beat it with a fork like we're scrambling eggs. But while we're doing that, we're slowly pulling in some of the flour from that wall of flour until it reaches somewhat of like a pancake batter consistency. Once it's too hard to work with a fork, take a bench scraper, scrape off any of the pasta dough on the fork, and then start to fold the flour into the dough and cut it, and then keep folding and cutting it and compressing it onto itself until a rough ball forms. Once you can start kneading it, you just want to start to work the ball until it smooths out a bit, picks up all of the flour from the board, and at that point you're going to tell whether it's hydrated properly or not. I can tell mine's a little sticky based on how it's sticking to my hand, so I'm going to add a little bit of flour, not too much, just a little bit of flour, knead the dough onto the flour, and it should stop sticking to my hand and the board, and we'll be able to knead it to smooth it out. So now the dough's not sticking to my hands and it's not sticking to the board, and we don't need any more flour. So now we can start to knead the dough in a way that incorporates air into the dough. So you're going to fold the dough onto itself almost till one point meets the other, and then using your palm, roll forward, pinching the two ends together, and then turning and repeating. It's going to develop strong gluten, and it's going to work a lot of air into the dough that's going to create a really nice texture, create really a nice light pasta. And once we got this smooth ball, we just want to wrap it. Wrap it up in some plastic wrap. It's going to create a nice humid environment. It's going to allow the pasta dough to soften and make it easier to further knead. So we're just going to rest it on the board for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, you're going to see in that plastic, there's a humid environment. There's a little condensation. That helps continue to hydrate the dough, which is why resting in plastic is useful. The dough's sort of darkened. It's almost transformed. It's gotten even smoother. It looks just more like a luscious pillow, and it's going to be even easier to knead. So just like we did before, we're going to work more air into the dough. Pulling back one end to meet the other, pushing forward with your palms, sealing the two ends, turning and rotating and repeating for about 5 to 10 minutes. Then we're going to form it back into a ball, cut it in half, see how much air we worked into the dough, and as you can see, it's beautifully hydrated. There's a beautiful amount of air pockets. This is perfect pasta dough. Roll those balls up again, wrap them in plastic wrap, and then we're going to let those rest in the fridge overnight because we're going to use them tomorrow, and that's an ideal texture. But if you're going to use them now, leave them out on the board at room temperature to rest for about 2 to 3 hours before using. Next, we have to work on our ravioli stuffing. In Italy, it's called ripieno, just means stuffing. And so we're going to pull some leftover chicken. I got some dark meat here that's going to work great for this recipe, but I want to take the skin off first. I've got the oven preheating at 425 degrees. I want to make sure we get this skin nice and crispy. It's going to work as a nice little garnish on top. So I'm going to use 2 of these quarter sheet trays. I'm going to pull the turkey skin as much as I can, and then I'm going to lay them flat in the sheet tray and then put one on top of the other to make sure they stay flat. Then we're going to pop them into that 425 degree oven for about 20 minutes until they're golden brown and crispy. Now we've got 5-second rule, right? So we just want to start to take the turkey meat and just start to pull it, make sure there's no bones or cartilage in there anywhere, and add them to a bowl. You're gonna need around 7 to 8 ounces of the turkey. Now, as far as the other stuff to go in it, I got my mom's famous German stuffing, my grandma's baked kale, some leftover mashed potatoes. I got some gravy. Now I got one gravy that's a little bit frozen, but still pliable, and then one that's a little looser. I've also got one that was from last week's video. That's tighter because I reduced the stock more by about double before making the gravy. So there's more collagen, and we almost want that for this recipe. We sort of want it to act like a soup dumpling inside of the ravioli. If you don't make your own stock and you use store-bought, you won't have the collagen anyway. So one way to do it is to just take whatever gravy you have left over that's still like a little loose and just freeze it a little bit. And we'll be able to stuff the raviolis like that. So I'm gonna keep this cold. We're gonna use this later. I've got this looser gravy here that's gonna act as moisture for the filling. So we got some ricotta. I'm gonna add at least a cup of it to a bowl, maybe a little bit more, a little salt, and then I'm gonna add some Parmigiano Reggiano, maybe like a half cup to a cup of that. Then I'm gonna add the pulled turkey meat. Then I'm gonna add about a half cup of the stuffing, about a half cup of the baked kale, about a half cup of the mashed potatoes, and then about a half cup of that loose gravy. If you got a gravy that's tight, like has a lot of collagen in it, it would work as well. But the gravy is that core Thanksgiving flavor. It's gonna moisten everything. It's gonna sort of emulsify everything together. And we're just gonna give that a real nice mix, make sure everything's incorporated, and then we can puree this guy up. We're gonna get a food processor out. We're gonna take that mixture and we're gonna add it right to the food processor, and we're gonna puree it until it's a smooth, pipeable mixture. Let it go till it's smooth, then give it a taste. It needs a little bit of salt. I'm gonna add a little bit more of the gravy because that is like that core flavor of Thanksgiving. And then to brighten it up, a little bit of lemon zest. Then we're gonna let it puree, and then we're gonna get it into a bowl and then into a large piping bag. We're gonna clean up the piping bag, tie it up, and get that into the refrigerator until we're ready to use it. Then I got my semi-frozen gravy. I'm gonna get that into a piping bag, tie up the top, and then I'm just gonna pop that into the freezer until we're ready to use it. But we don't want it to get completely frozen. We just wanna keep it semi-frozen. Again, if you've got a gelatinous gravy, you don't need to do this step. Now by now it's been about 25 minutes and I almost forgot about my turkey skin. So we're gonna pull it out. It's actually perfect. It's nice and crisp and golden brown. It's perfect. So we're gonna set that off to the side while we work on making the ravioli. I don't know about you, but during the holidays, I need plenty of coffee. And our guests like coffee, but we don't have a coffee machine, which is why I love our sponsor today, Cometeer. Cometeer is a new way to make, or should I say melt, coffee at home. They offer a pour-over quality coffee from some of the world's best specialty coffee roasters, brewed 10 times stronger and delivered in frozen recyclable aluminum capsules. The brewed coffee is immediately flash frozen in these pucks to lock in freshness and flavor. It's a completely new format of coffee. Then all you have to do is add 6 to 8 ounces of hot water and melt the puck, and you've got coffee that tastes like a barista just brewed it in your home. The brewing has already been done for you. You just need to melt the puck and then finish the coffee however you like. Maybe you like an iced coffee and you can make one as well. Let a puck defrost in the refrigerator overnight, or dip the frozen capsule in some really hot water and give it about 5 minutes to melt. Pour it in the cup and then add some cold water and some milk if you'd like, and you've got iced coffee. And for a limited time, you can receive a free sleeve of Barista's Choice coffee with your first order. That's 8 free cups of coffee when you use my code NotAnotherCookingShow at checkout at cometeer.com. So head on down to the link in the description, grab the offer, and let's get back to the recipe. So now we're ready to make the actual ravioli. Dough is beautiful, it's nice and hydrated, it's soft, it's gonna be easy to work with and easy to sort of stretch so that we can get one layer on top of the other and fold it around a big mound of filling. Give it a cut in half just so we have some manageable pieces. Still got all those air pockets in there, which is what we wanted to work with. It's a beautiful dough. First thing I'm gonna do is work the dough into somewhat of a square or rectangle, just so that it sets a good shape for the dough when we work it through the machine. Then you wanna set up a pasta machine, and at the setting 0, or the widest setting, run that dough through the machine. Then you wanna fold it onto itself, again, pushing down to form a square or rectangle, and then back through 0 in the machine. A little flour might be needed, but you don't need a lot. You don't want to change the hydration of the dough, and a properly hydrated dough won't need much going through the machine. And then you're just going to work your way to the 7th setting on the machine if you've got it. I believe some machines don't go all the way to 7, but you just want it thin enough to see the shadow of your hand in the light on the other side of the pasta. Then we're gonna get the pasta onto the board. We're gonna fold it in half and then cut it in half. So we have sort of two identical sheets. And then I have these pastry cutters, one that's 3 inches and then one that's 2 or 3 sizes smaller than the large 3-inch cutter. And I'm gonna use the soft curved edge of both of them. First with the larger one, I'm gonna just start to create a mark on the dough that just gives me an idea how many I can get out of one sheet of pasta. And then I'm gonna take this smaller cutter and make a marking smaller inside of the larger circle. That's gonna be my guide for the filling. As you can see, I can get 5 ravioli or raviolo out of each sheet. Then I'm gonna take the piping bag filled with the ricotta mixture and I'm gonna snip the edge off the bag, not too thick, but also not too thin. And I'm going to use the inside circle and pipe 3 layers of rings around that inner circle, leaving the center hollow a place that we're going to pipe the gravy into. You're basically making these little volcanoes of gravy and ricotta. And then you fill that cavity with the gravy. This is a total riff off of the famous Resdora Uovo Raviolo in New York. Usually there's an egg yolk that's placed in the center. Today instead, with that gelatinous gravy or that frozen thickened gravy, you can sort of create the same idea just with the flavors of Thanksgiving. Then we're going to spritz both sides with a little water I have in a little spray bottle, which is really helpful when making pasta. And then you're going to take one sheet and place it on top of the other. You want to get the edges to meet each other. And then what we can do is use the edge of our hands to compress and push out any air, shaping a tight little mound of filling and also sealing all of the flat pieces of dough with our hand. You can also use a little cake tester to sort of pop any air bubbles that might remain in the pasta and then use your finger to just push out the air and to just seal that hole back up. And then we can take that large circular 3-inch pastry cutter and punch out each of the large raviolis. Now, one problem you might run into raviolis is when you've got to this stage, you've got one part of the ravioli that's a single thickness, and then when the 2 pieces of dough meet, you've got a double thickness dough. And when you go to cook it, if you don't compress the 2 into a single thickness, you're gonna get crunchy pieces of dough. So you wanna go around the edges with your thumb and squeeze the double thickness dough back down to a single thickness dough. And you wanna place them on a sheet tray with a heavy dose of semolina flour to make sure that gravy doesn't kind of hydrate the dough and make it sticky. Then we're gonna pop them into the freezer for about 10 to 20 minutes to firm that inside back up. Now, before we get into making everything, there's only a few other ingredients we're gonna need, which is some pecans, some butter, a little bit of lemon, and some sage. I'm just gonna pick some sage leaves. Now, the amount of these ingredients depend entirely on how many ravioli you're making, and I'm making enough for maybe 1 to 2 people. So we'll do about 10 to 15 sage leaves, and do about a handful of pecans, and I'm gonna chop them very roughly. I don't really want any like small crumbs. I just want like nice chunks. Get that into a little bowl, and then I'm using about 1/4 of a lemon, reserving the rest of the lemon for the zest for garnish later. Then I'm doing about half a stick of butter, unsalted. This is all we need to make the sauce. Now I got a pot of salted boiling water. I want to keep that at a nice gentle boil whenever you do any kind of stuffed pasta. Next to that, get a pan preheating on high heat. I'm going to pop the ravioli into the boiling water, and you want to make sure you give them a stir. You're going to see a mistake that I made that you don't want to make. Now the pan next to the pot of water should be hot. I'm going to add the butter to the pan and start to melt it, and I'm going to begin to brown it. Make sure you keep those raviolis moving. And once I see all the butter is melted and bubbling, I'm going to add the pecans. Then I'm going to add the sage. I'm going to hit that with a little bit of salt. I want to toast the pecans. I want to infuse the butter with that sage flavor. Maybe crisp up the sage a little bit. Now, as you can see, the butter is browning. The ravioli have started to float. Now I'm going to let them float for another 30 seconds to a minute to make sure the edges of that pasta are properly cooked and not crunchy while we finish our brown butter. And we're going to see that butter is nice and brown. It's getting a nice golden color. When I see that, I want to shut the temperature off, because I'm about to add lemon, and if I add lemon juice right now to this super hot butter, it's gonna make a big mess. So I'm gonna shut the heat off, give it a second to cool, add a little squeeze of lemon just to sort of cool that butter down enough that I can then start to squeeze the rest of that lemon juice into that butter mixture. And that's just gonna brighten everything up, instead of just making like a rich fatty sauce. Once we got that lemon juice in, that ravioli should have been floating for about a minute or so. We're gonna fish it out and add it directly into the brown butter. And what you're gonna see is, unfortunately, I didn't nudge that bottom ravioli enough and it stuck to the bottom of the pan. I tried to get it loose, but it ripped the bottom of the ravioli open, so we lost that guy. Rest in peace. We're gonna ignore that mistake. We're gonna add a little bit of pasta water into the brown butter, and then we're just gonna start to baste the ravioli with the brown butter, get that nuts and that sage on top of the ravioli, and we're just gonna cook it in that sauce for maybe 30 seconds, a minute max. Once we got a nice thick sauce, the ravioli is nice and cooked, coated in that sauce, then it's time we can plate. Now you can plate it one of two ways. Say you're having a dinner party and you want to serve this as an appetizer, you serve it as a raviolo, or one ravioli. One raviolo onto the plate, some of the nuts and the sage and that brown butter, a little lemon zest. Don't forget that turkey skin, crumble that up on top, a little Parmigiano Reggiano, and you've got a stunning appetizer. What you do is you take a knife or a fork and you cut right into the center of this guy, and what should happen is an ooze of that gravy that's now gonna form the sauce for the ravioli, and all of the flavors of Thanksgiving will be present, and it will be amazingly delicious. That's pretty cool, right? But if you want to serve this as a main course for yourself or for your family, you'd serve ravioli or multiple raviolo in the bowl or on a plate. I lay 3 because 3 looks nice, but between you and me, I'd serve myself 4, to be honest. On top of that, we go with the sage, the nuts, that brown butter, crispy turkey skin, and again some Parmigiano Reggiano. And again, you cut into it, it should ooze all over the place. This is a glorious and possibly one of the greatest ways to use Thanksgiving leftovers. I honestly love this dish. Takes what might be some tired leftovers and makes it so fresh, so new, so delicious. Recipe's gonna be in my holiday plan of attack. It's not an actual book, it's an ebook. It's a digital download, updates as I make recipes, so the link's gonna be down in the description. Thanks Comatir for sponsoring this video, and I hope to see you at Sunday supper. That's all I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself. Now for this recipe, you're gonna need Thanksgiving leftovers. So for the recipe I posted last week, the new way I make a turkey, link's gonna be on the screen along with a few others. Thank you so much for watching.